Son-in-law handed me a plate of dog food at my own daughter's Christmas dinner. My daughter laughed. That night, I drove away and never came back on their terms. What I did the next morning made them both cry, and not the kind of tears that deserve comfort. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. The smell hit me first. That sharp, metallic tang you recognize even before your brain catches up. I'd been upstairs washing my hands when my daughter called everyone to the table. I came down in my good slacks and the green sweater my late wife had given me our last Christmas together. 63 years old, retired, in decent health, wearing the sweater of a woman I still missed every single morning. I figured that counted for something. The dining room was full. My daughter and my son-in-law had invited 8 people I barely recognized. His co-workers, a couple from their neighborhood, his sister with her husband. The table looked beautiful. I'll give them that. Turkey breast, green bean casserole, sweet potatoes, a basket of rolls my daughter had made from scratch. She learned that recipe from her mother. Watching her set it down, I felt a flicker of the old warmth. Then my son-in-law came out of the kitchen carrying a small bowl. He set it in front of me with both hands, like a waiter presenting something special. Inside, a scoop of canned dog food, the brown kind. I could see the label had been peeled off, but the ridged cylinder shape was unmistakable. He'd spooned it into one of our good china bowls. My wife's china. Nobody spoke. I looked at my daughter. She was already smiling, waiting to see my face. Not a nervous smile. Not an embarrassed one. Anticipation. "That's the budget option," my son-in-law said, loud enough for everyone. "Since you're not exactly contributing to the household these days." My daughter laughed. Not a giggle. A real laugh. 2 of his co-workers looked at their plates. His sister shifted in her chair. No one said a word. I sat with that bowl in front of me for probably 4 seconds. Long enough to understand exactly what was happening. Long enough to read every face at the table. Long enough to feel something inside me go completely, permanently still. I pushed back my chair, stood up, and walked to the kitchen. Set the bowl on the counter next to the sink. Came back through the dining room without looking at anyone. Climbed the stairs and went into my bedroom. I closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed in the dark. They weren't worried. I could hear the dinner resuming below me, silverware, conversation, my son-in-law's voice carrying above the rest. He was performing now, entertaining the table with whatever story came next. My daughter's laugh floated up through the floorboards. I sat in the dark for a long time. Long enough for the sounds to change. Dessert, then cleanup, then voices saying goodbye, then the quiet of a house settling into night. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I did something I hadn't done in 18 months of living under their roof. I thought clearly. I moved to Phoenix after my wife passed. That was the truth of it. Our house in Columbus was too large, too full of her, and my daughter had called and said, "Dad, come stay with us. We have the room. It'll be good for all of us." I believed her. Maybe I needed to. I sold most of our furniture, put what I couldn't part with in a storage unit, and drove west with 3 suitcases and a filing box of important papers. That was 18 months ago. In those 18 months, I had covered half of their mortgage every month. $3,000. In cash, handed to my son-in-law because he said it was easier for the books. I had paid the utility bills. I had replaced the hot water heater when it failed in March. I had bought groceries twice a week, filling a refrigerator that my son-in-law emptied with the casualness of a man who's never been hungry. I had also paid off the remaining balance on their truck, $2,200, because my daughter said they were drowning and I couldn't watch that happen. I'm a retired civil engineer. I spent 35 years calculating load-bearing capacity for a living. I know exactly what stress a structure can hold before it breaks. I just hadn't been paying attention to my own. The house had gone quiet around midnight. I sat at the small desk in the corner of my room, the lamp on low, and opened the notebook I've been keeping since February. Not a diary. A ledger. Old habit. I'd been keeping one since my 20s, partly professional instinct, partly my father's influence. He told me once that a man who doesn't keep records is a man who can be lied to about his own life. I added the date. Christmas Eve. Wrote down what had happened. Then I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out the folder I kept there. Monthly summaries going back to when I arrived. Mortgage contributions, utilities, groceries, the truck, the water heater, a plumber I'd paid for twice. My daughter's car registration when she said they were short. I added the column. Total $67,420 over 18 months. I wrote it at the bottom of the page. Circled it, not with anger, just to make it real. Then I closed the notebook and began to pack. I didn't take everything, just what mattered. 7 days of clothes, my laptop, the filing box, my medication, the notebook, a photograph of my wife from our anniversary trip to Yellowstone. I moved quietly. My room was at the far end of the hall from theirs. They slept late on holidays. I wasn't worried. By 5 in the morning, everything I needed was in the trunk of my Buick. I went back inside once for the folder. Left the note on the kitchen counter. Gone to see an old friend. Back in a few days. I weighted it with a coffee mug. Her mug. Blue with a chip on the handle, the one I'd been using every morning since I arrived, because it made me feel like she was still somewhere nearby. I left the mug there. Some things you have to let go of in stages. I backed out of the driveway in the dark. No lights on in the house. No faces at the windows. Just the street, the cold December air, and the highway opening up east of the city. I drove to a Holiday Inn Express 20 miles outside Phoenix. Paid cash for 4 nights, using a stack of 20s I kept in the filing box. The woman behind the desk was young, maybe 25, watching a cooking video on her phone behind the counter. She didn't ask questions. I appreciated that. The room was clean. White walls, fur mattress, blackout curtains. I sat on the bed and turned my phone face down on the nightstand. Then I opened my laptop. My first call wasn't to a lawyer. It was to my bank. I'd been with First Western for 30 years, since before my daughter was born. I called the direct line I had memorized. A man named Howard answered, and I gave him my account number and walked through verification. I explained that I needed to remove an authorized user from my checking account. My son-in-law had been added 8 months ago when my daughter had convinced me they needed emergency access while I was having a minor procedure. Howard pulled up the account. I see Marcus Chen listed as an authorized user since April, he said. You'd like to remove him? Immediately, I said, and reset all digital access codes. Of course. And the debit card ending in 4471 that's also linked to this account under his name. Cancel it. Done. I'll send confirmation to your email. Is there anything else? I asked him to add fraud alerts to both my checking and my savings. He set them up for text and email, both. By 6:15 in the morning, my son-in-law had no path to my money. I made a second call at 6:30. My Visa, which my daughter had been an authorized user on since I arrived, ostensibly for household groceries and supplies. I'd reviewed the past 4 months of statements the night before. The charges I found were not groceries. A spa, twice. A clothing boutique I didn't recognize. A restaurant I'd never been to. Day shares to places I couldn't account for. Subscription boxes. 3 of them, all to her name. Nothing that had ever appeared in our house. I removed her, reset the PIN, updated the password. By 7 in the morning, both of them were financially disconnected from me. I ordered room service, eggs, toast, coffee, and ate at the small table by the window while the sun came up over the desert. My phone started ringing at 9:30. I knew what was happening on the other end without needing to answer. My son-in-law would be at a gas station somewhere, card declined. Or my daughter at a pharmacy, or a coffee shop, or trying to move money online. The shape of their day would be collapsing in stages. Each failed transaction, another wall going up, between them and the life they'd been living at my expense. I let the calls go to voicemail. By noon, I had listened to 6 messages. My daughter's first, confused, her voice that particular pitch she used when she thought patience would work. Dad, something's wrong with the account. Can you call the bank? Her second, an hour later, harder. Dad, the card is canceled. I know you canceled it. Please call me. Her third, late morning, different. The theatrical note had crept in, the one I recognized from 20 years of watching her navigate disappointment. I can't believe you do this on Christmas. I cannot believe you do this on Christmas. I cannot believe this. My son-in-law left one message. I heard him start, catch himself, and hang up. He'd almost said something he couldn't take back. Smart enough. Just barely. I listened to all of them once. Then I deleted them and called an attorney. I'd done my research the night before, in those quiet hours before I packed. I'd searched Arizona property law tenant rights eviction and house guest removal Arizona and found what I needed to know. In Arizona, a house guest with no written lease and no formal rental agreement is not a tenant. They are a licensee. The process for removing them is different from a standard eviction. Faster, less complicated, but it still requires documentation and a proper written notice. I've found a firm based in Scottsdale. Family and property law. Strong reviews, clear website. I sent an email at 2 in the morning asking for a consultation. By 9 they'd replied. I called, spoke to the intake coordinator, and had an appointment scheduled for the day after Christmas at 10. That gave me the rest of Christmas Day and the following morning. I spent them working. I opened my laptop and built what I'd been mentally constructing since February. A complete financial accounting of my 18 months in their house. I'd been keeping notes. Now I turned them into a proper spreadsheet. Column A, date. Column B, description. Column C, amount. Column D, payment method. Row by row, month by month. Mortgage contribution. Mortgage contribution. Mortgage contribution. Each $3,000. 18 of them. Utilities, September. Utilities, October. The hot water heater. The plumber, first visit. The plumber, second visit. 6 weeks later, when the same pipe developed a new problem, my son-in-law had fixed himself. With materials I paid for. The truck payoff. The car registration. The groceries, estimated conservatively at $400 a month because I shopped, I cooked, I ate the least of the three of us. By 11 that night, I had the final number. $67,420. I formatted the spreadsheet cleanly, added a summary tab, printed 2 copies on the hotel's business center printer, and put them in my folder. Then I added something else. I went back through my bank statements, every month since April when I'd added my son-in-law to my account. I'd reviewed them before, but I'd been looking for household expenses, things that might reasonably have been charged to my account by someone managing a shared home. I found those, sure, but I'd also been skimming past a second category of charges, ones I hadn't wanted to name. I named them now. Sporting goods store, $380. Tools I never received. A gym membership in his name, billed monthly. A streaming service I'd never heard of. A cash withdrawal, $200, that I had absolutely not made. Another, 3 weeks later, $200 again, a furniture store charge. $1,400, the sectional in the living room that I'd been told came with the house. I cross-referenced everything carefully, the way I'd been trained to cross-reference things for 35 years. By the time I was finished, the number was different. The unauthorized charges alone, not counting the household support I'd willingly provided, came to $9,340. I sat back and looked at it. Not angry. Settled. The way a calculation feels when it finally balances. The law firm was in a glass building off Scottsdale Road. 3rd floor, nice carpet, framed desert photography on the walls. The attorney I met was a woman named Sandra, mid-40s. Direct without being cold. She wore reading glasses pushed up on her head and had a legal pad in front of her before I'd even taken off my coat. "Tell me the situation," she said. "Start with the basics." I gave her the facts. Retired, moved in with daughter and son-in-law 18 months ago. No written lease, no formal agreement. Financial contributions throughout. An incident on Christmas Eve that made clear the arrangement had to end. I'd already removed them from my financial accounts. Now I needed them out of the house. She made notes. Asked 2 questions. Did I own the house? No. It was in my daughter's name. Purchased before I arrived. I'd been contributing to the mortgage but had no legal ownership stake. That changed the calculus. I watched her adjust her approach. "So you're not seeking to reclaim property," she said. "You want to reclaim your financial independence, document what was taken, and potentially recover unauthorized charges. That's correct. The good news is that the financial account removal you've already done is solid. They have no legal standing to challenge that. The unauthorized charges, $9,000, that's actionable. We can send a formal demand letter. If he doesn't respond or refuses, you can file in civil court. In the household support, the $67,000, she looked at me steadily. That's harder. No written agreement, no terms, no signed acknowledgement that it was a loan rather than a gift. Courts are reluctant to award that kind of money in family cohabitation situations unless you can show clear evidence of fraudulent intent from the beginning. She paused. Do you have anything in writing? Texts, emails, anything where they referred to repayment? I thought about it. My daughter mentioned once, in a text, that they would make it right when the business took off. Send me that thread. She drafted 2 documents while I sat across from her. The first was a formal demand letter for the unauthorized charges, $9,340, with a 30-day repayment deadline, referencing my attached documentation. The second was a personal letter, not legal, that she suggested I send separately, clearly stating my position, what had occurred, and that I considered the relationship irreparably changed unless certain conditions were met. The personal letter isn't a legal instrument, she said, but it creates a record, and sometimes it opens a door that the legal letter closes. I paid her fee, tucked both letters into my folder, and drove back to the hotel. That evening, my daughter called 11 times. My son-in-law called 4. I listened to each voicemail once. My daughters had evolved through several phases over the course of the day. The first 2 were still negotiating, still convinced this was a solvable problem. By the 3rd and 4th, the theatrical grief had fully arrived. The voice breaks, the "how could you do this to your own family?" The careful mention of the holidays as though the date were relevant. By the 7th, something else appeared. Smaller. More honest. Dad, I'm scared. We have bills. Please just talk to me. That one I listened to twice. I didn't call back. I returned to the house on the morning of December 28th, 4 days since Christmas Eve. I wanted to be present when they received the formal demand letter, not to watch them suffer, but because I'd learned, over 35 years of professional life, that paper means more when the person who handed it to you is standing in the room. My key still worked. They hadn't changed the locks, which told me something about how certain they still were that this would resolve in their favor. They were in the kitchen when I walked in. My son-in-law was on his phone, leaning against the counter. My daughter was at the table, coffee in front of her. Looking like she hadn't slept, she looked up when I came to the door, and something crossed her face. Relief, fear, calculation, grief, all at once. Dad, she stood up. I set the envelope on the kitchen table. That's from my attorney, I said. Read it carefully. My son-in-law picked it up first. He was always faster to grab things. He tore it open, scanned the first paragraph, and looked up at me with an expression I hadn't seen from him before. Not arrogance. Something closer to disbelief. $9,000, he said. You're suing us for $9,000. Demanding repayment of unauthorized charges. There's a spreadsheet attached that documents each transaction. I swear. He stopped. Whatever explanation he'd been reaching for, he couldn't make it work. He knew what was on that spreadsheet. He'd made those charges. This is insane. We're family. Family doesn't help themselves to my savings account without asking. My daughter had taken the letter from him by then. She was reading it, her face going pale. Dad, I didn't know about some of these. The cash withdrawals. I didn't know he was. That's between you and him, I said. The letter is addressed to both of you. You have 30 days. She started crying. Not the theatrical version, real tears, the kind that come when the performance has run out of road. What do you want from us? Just tell me what you want. I pulled out the second letter, the personal one Sandra had drafted. Set it on the table beside the first. Read that one too. It explains where I stand. Then I walked to the hallway and picked up my suitcase, which I'd left by the door. I hadn't come back to stay. My son-in-law followed me to the hallway. His voice dropped to something meant to be dangerous. You're going to regret walking away from your own family. You know that, right? You'll be alone." I turned and looked at him. He was 37 years old, standing in a house he couldn't afford without my money, threatening a 63-year-old man who had just finished documenting $9,000 of unauthorized charges in a legal spreadsheet. "I've been alone in this house for 18 months, I said. "This is the first time I've felt free." I picked up my suitcase and walked out. I drove to a furnished apartment I'd found online 2 nights earlier. Month-to-month lease, reasonable rent, located 3 miles from the library where I'd started volunteering on Wednesdays before everything fell apart. The building manager, a stout, cheerful man who went by Sal, showed me the unit on the 4th floor. South-facing windows. A small balcony looking out over a courtyard with 2 citrus trees. I signed the lease that afternoon. The first night, I ordered pizza and ate it standing at the kitchen counter, looking out at the courtyard. A couple was walking a retriever below. A kid on a bicycle circled the path 3 times. Normal life, continuing. My phone showed 4 missed calls from my daughter. I didn't check the voicemails. In January, my son-in-law responded to the demand letter through a lawyer of his own, a younger guy by the writing style, who made 3 arguments that Sandra dismantled in her reply in about 20 minutes. By mid-January, we had a payment arrangement, not the full amount, but a monthly figure that acknowledged the debt. Sandra advised me to take it. "A payment plan on 9,000 beats a court date on 9,000, she said. I agreed. My daughter and I did not speak for 6 weeks. The silence was uncomfortable, but it was honest, more honest than the 18 months that preceded it. In February, she called. Not to negotiate, not to cry. She asked if she could come by. She came alone. She sat at my kitchen table, the small one I bought at a second-hand shop on my 3rd day in the new apartment, and she said, "I let him treat you that way because it was easier than fighting with him. That's the truth. I'm ashamed of it." I made us both coffee. We sat for a while. "I'm not forgiving him," I said. "I know. And I'm not coming back. That house, that arrangement, it's done." "I know that too." She asked about the volunteer work. I told her about the library, the after-school reading program, the kids who came in on Tuesdays. She listened like she used to when she was small, and I was telling her about my workday at the dinner table, leaning her chin on her hand, genuinely curious. When she left, I stood on the balcony and watched her car pull out of the parking lot. The citrus trees below were beginning to bud. February in Arizona is its own kind of spring. Tentative, pale. Everything just starting to consider coming back. I didn't know what would happen between my daughter and me. That was a separate calculation, one I couldn't run in a spreadsheet. But I knew what I'd done, and what it had cost me, and what it had returned. My wife used to say that some people mistake patience for permission. She meant it as a warning. I'd heard it as a compliment on my temperament. The way you hear advice that applies to you perfectly and still don't take it. I understood it now. I went inside and put on water for another cup of coffee. The apartment was quiet. The afternoon light came through the south windows, and it was clean and it was mine, and that was enough. The bowl of dog food sat in my wife's china for about 4 seconds before I understood what it meant. Not just the humiliation of it that was obvious enough. What I understood, standing at that table in my good sweater, was that I had been operating under a set of assumptions that no longer matched reality. I had assumed that generosity would be recognized, that patience would be respected, that because I loved my daughter, she would, in some basic way, protect me. None of those assumptions had been true for a long time. The bulges finally made them impossible to ignore. There's something that happens when you've built a life around doing the right thing. Not for applause, just because it's right, and someone takes that as evidence that you can be taken from indefinitely. I spent 35 years as an engineer because I believed in precision, in systems that hold what they're supposed to hold. I knew how to read a structure under stress. I just hadn't been applying that knowledge to my own life. I'd been so busy being reliable that I'd stopped paying attention to whether reliability was being met with anything except appetite. What changed for me wasn't the anger. I didn't feel much anger, honestly. What changed was clarity. The kind that comes when you stop hoping a situation will improve and start seeing it as it actually is. My son-in-law had been withdrawing cash from my account for months. My daughter had known the arrangement was unsustainable and said nothing. $67,000 over 18 months, and what I got in return was a bowl of food meant for a dog, served in my late wife's china, while 8 people watched. I kept records because my father taught me to. That discipline, the habit of writing things down, of keeping columns straight, of refusing to let memory blur what documentation can preserve, that's what gave me something to stand on when I needed to stand. It wasn't cleverness, it was just the practice of paying attention to my own life with the same rigor I'd always applied to my work. If I'd done that sooner, from the beginning, things might have gone differently. And then there was the harder part. Walking out. Sitting in that hotel room for 4 days without answering the phone, watching the voicemails accumulate, that took something different from record keeping. It took the willingness to hold a line even when the person on the other side of it was someone I had loved since the day she was born. That kind of steadiness doesn't come naturally to people who care. It has to be built. The same way anything load-bearing gets built, slowly with intention, tested before you need it. My wife used to say that patience is only a virtue if you're being patient with the right things. I was patient with the wrong things for a long time. Patient with disrespect. Patient with being taken for granted. Patient with a version of family that was really just a financial arrangement dressed up in the language of love. What I have now is smaller in some ways. A furnished apartment, a balcony, 2 citrus trees in the courtyard below. But it's honest. Nothing in it costs me more than it's worth. And some mornings, when the light comes through the south windows and the coffee is hot and the day ahead belongs entirely to me, I think about what it means to have finally applied the same standards to my own life that I spent a career applying to everything else. The structures that hold are the ones built on accurate numbers. I should have known that all along.